This is your instructor Dan Scollin, and I am going to be discussing and reading from a journal article titled Doing Public Participation on the Geospatial Web from the Association of American Geographers Journal. And this touches on a number of the concepts that we discussed in class this past week, in particular volunteered geographic information and Web 2.0. And so I'll go ahead and start off by reading excerpts, and I'll give a little translation to a few of these things along the way. Understand that this is written in academic journal language, and so sometimes the vocabulary is rather academic, but again, I'll do my best to translate some things along the way. So the authors begin by saying, the geospatial web, or GeoWeb, is widely considered to have transformed civic participation, that is, participation of the population in the broader interests of society. The GeoWeb is defined as the geographic extension of Web 2.0, a suite of geographically related web services and locationally aware devices. Remember that Web 2.0 was this movement to not just consuming data, but users of the web actually contributing data. They go on to say, the GeoWeb encompasses not only the hardware and software that facilitates cloud-based mapping, but also data contributed by individuals as volunteered geographic information, or VGI. And they quote Michael Goodchild, who was the innovator of this idea. They go on to say that the GeoWeb offers accessibility through an easier to use geographical, easier to use graphical user interface, or GUI, G-U-I. Most important, the GeoWeb offers the potential for non-experts to communicate unstructured narratives. Non-experts. We know that volunteers are variably motivated to contribute geographic information. For instance, some out of a sense of altruism, a pride of place, or a sentiment that data must be free. Again, different motivators for people that are contributing data. They go on to talk about the researchers have developed techniques to assess the quality of asserted qualitative content. This is in contrast to what we saw in the lecture last week of the contrast between asserted and authoritative content. Here we're talking about asserted content from individuals, non-experts. The GeoWeb enables classification and judgment of individuals by algorithm, furthers the digital inequities, and places the public at the mercy of an increasingly corporate state. So now we start to see a negative perspective on what we may be seeing as a result of this GeoWeb as they're describing it. They continue to distinguish a few things, again, that were introduced in the last lecture. PGIS, which is participatory GIS, and public participation GIS. So the work that I've described at some length in Borneo would be considered PGIS. And they go on to make the distinction that public participation GIS, or PPGIS, is a study of the application of geographic information and/or geographic information technologies used by members of the public, that is, non-officials, both as individuals, that is, private citizens, and grassroots groups, for participation in public processes, things such as data collection, mapping, analysis, and/or policymaking, and that affect their lives. And as a field that should do good, quote unquote, whether it empowers marginalized people, promotes social inclusion, builds capacity, or furthers democracy. PPGIS, therefore, is a way for citizens or for civil society to interact with and influence the state, that is, government activities. This distinguishes itself from PGIS, participatory GIS, which emphasizes giving people a voice for concerns independent of their connection to policy. Again, this is what we've done with the indigenous people in Borneo. Despite these distinctions, PPGIS is largely ill-defined, the authors claim. Armistead goes on to say that there is a ladder of citizen participation that can be identified in which you have lower levels of cooperation, such as simply informing people, to higher levels of communication where you actually have participation. Part of the objective here is to engage have-not citizens, quote unquote, have-not citizens. Those are the underserved parts of the population. But they go on to say that there's a dual potential here, and they argue that GI systems, geographic information systems, can simultaneously empower and marginalize the public. They talk about the fact that digitally equipped members within the group may benefit disproportionately relative to the have-nots, those that are already equipped with smartphones or other digital devices and the capabilities to use those devices. PPGIS tends to be implemented by on a small scale, relatively collective interaction involving relatively few participants. These assumptions frame the largest potential from PPGIS to the GeoWeb. And so again, we're going to make a distinction here with the GeoWeb. So participation on the GeoWeb differs materially from PPGIS in geographic scale, data volume, reach, as well as the need for technological and cartographic expertise. The GeoWeb as a platform and VGI as the content contributed to the GeoWeb invoke a similar shift in literature in terms of the way that these things are interpreted and how they're defined. But again, they're using here GeoWeb as a platform, the geographic web, if you will, and VGI, volunteer geographic information, as the content that is actually being contributed. Researchers contend that the GeoWeb enables a transfer of power from democratic voices to the geospatial algorithm, which can reinforce social and class divides. Again, a critique of the computer algorithm as a way of interpreting information that's coming in, which can end up having the effect of marginalizing and decreasing the level of democracy. They go on to point out that profit is the goal of the market, not democracy. So a lot of our web tools are market-driven. They're intended for the purpose of making money. They go on to describe citizen-to-government linkages. This is increasingly common in cities where we have GeoWeb tools that are designed for citizens to do things like identify areas of blight or places that have graffiti that need to be cleaned up and what have you. All right, well, that's my summary of this brief article. So a couple of the key terms that came out of this, of course, PGIS, participatory GIS, public participation GIS, which is more around trying to influence policy and changing government activities. The GeoWeb, so this idea of sort of Web 2.0 with a geographic interface to it, and that has a much more broader connotation in this age of cloud computing, where we're storing our data out in these servers on the cloud, and you or I can contribute data, and do indeed contribute data daily in our internet activities. And so, these are some of the key concepts that we're looking at and something that will guide us as we move forward.